What is up, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of Socially Distanced Sports Talk. My name is Amer Bektas, and we are less than a week away from the return of MLB baseball. And what better way to get us better prepared for the season other than talking to ESPN play-by-play announcer Dan Shulman, or as Dickie V would say, Dan Shulman. Dan, how you doing today?
I'm doing great. Dickie V does say Danny Shulman all the time. So I actually once on the air said to him, there's an L in my last name. It's Shulman. And he actually on the air said, well, it doesn't belong there. What's it doing there? So, but he's a beauty and I love him. And yeah, I hope baseball is back, or we're getting there, but with the virus, you never know, but it looks pretty good. Like the season will get underway.
We're all hopeful that we will have some return to some type of normalcy. But to start off kind of today's show, I wanted to go back to your days when you were in college at the University of Western Ontario, where you originally were like a math major. Am I correct there?
Yeah, my major was actually statistics and actuarial science. And actuarial science is kind of like pensions and insurance. So yeah, sometimes I just say math because it's easier to say, but I was a hardcore math guy.
So what made you like change your career path, going from something like all math related, all technical, to pursuing a dream and a career in sports journalism?
Well, when I was in university, as we say here in Canada, I knocked on the door of the university radio station, CHRW at Western, and asked if they needed volunteers and if they did sports, and they said yes, and started doing some football and basketball games in London, Ontario, where Western is located. And that's not like doing, Michigan football or Syracuse basketball or anything like that. It was on a smaller scale, and it wasn't something I was considering as a career, but I loved it. Made some good friends and spent hours and hours every week at the radio station, started doing a talk show, and again, did football and basketball games, graduated and started working as an actuary, and about 3-4 months into it said, you know what, I don't know if this is for me. And it was a big surprise, I think, to my parents when I went to them and talked to them about it and said, listen, I'd like to give this radio thing a shot if I can, and kind of went for it. So it was really just wanting to do something that I enjoyed. And I made a deal with my parents. I said, give me 2 years and let's see if I can, get some footing, get a job in this industry. And if not, I'll go back and do something else. And within 2 years, I was, doing well enough that I thought I could make a career out of it. So I decided to stay in it.
That's an awesome story. Just that pursue your dreams. I mean, what, you have nothing to lose. You're young. Why not try something new?
Yeah. Well, whenever I talk to, students or broadcasting classes, that sort of thing, I always tell them to do something they love. I don't know if it's what their parents or their professors want to hear, but I'm a big follow your dream guy, with the understanding that you better work your tail off if you're going to do it, because chances are there are a lot of other people who are following that same dream. So I think my parents, what made them feel good is again, this deal that I made with them. I said, give me 2 years. And my backup plan was I was going to go to business school. So I wrote the GMAT, and I kind of had that and a deferral in place. So I had that in my back pocket in case it didn't work out. But I'm a huge believer of doing something that you enjoy. I didn't get into this to get famous. I didn't get into this to get rich. I got into this to do something I love and to see where it went. And started off at a small local radio station in a city about 50 miles north of Toronto. Never could have imagined doing TV or play-by-play or ESPN or anything like that. Just wanted to do something that I enjoyed. And I think when you do something you enjoy, you work harder at it. When you work harder at something, you get better results.
Yeah, you're willing to put in the hours and all the extra work that nobody wants to do for when you're following something you love. And so how did you get started with the Jays? I mean, originally you auditioned for them and then you were kind of cut. So like kind of talk to me through that.
So I was the small radio station I told you about in a city north of Toronto. I worked there about 1.5 years, and then I got a job at a radio station in Toronto, which happened to be the station that carried Blue Jays games. But I was like evening sportscaster, weekend sportscaster, jack of all trades kind of thing. And eventually, over about 3-4 years at the radio station, I moved up and I started doing the midday talk show and then the afternoon drive talk show. And I was now doing some pre and post game shows on the Blue Jay game. So I kind of had a bit of a baseball reputation in terms of, what I would do on my talk show and stuff like that. And then the play-by-play announcer for the Blue Jays, who also does hockey here in Canada, decided he was going to cut back and just do hockey. So I went, actually, they called me and asked me if I wanted to audition for the job, and I said, sure. I had a grand total of 1 inning of baseball play-by-play in my life. The year before at spring training, I was down there covering it. We did our talk show from there for a week, and the Blue Jays radio guys let me sit in the booth and said to me, do you want to do an inning of play-by-play? And I did 1 inning of baseball play-by-play at a spring training game the year before. That's it. I'd done some basketball play-by-play and football, but I was young. And so I went in and auditioned for the Blue Jays job, and they said, thanks, but no thanks. We're going to go with someone else. So I said, okay. I was 28. I didn't expect to get the job. And I went back and did my talk show. And 2-3 months later, like I auditioned in November, and like in January or February, they called me back and said, we'd like to talk to you again. So they offered me the job then. Who they offered it to beforehand, I don't know. Why he didn't get the job, I don't know. I don't care. So I was just so excited to be talking to them. I've had a lot of big breaks in my life, but getting a chance to become the play-by-play voice of the Toronto Blue Jays way back in 1995 was the biggest.
And that's where the career started of you doing baseball and basketball as well. But was there any like one commentator that you looked up to that you would love listening to and you were like, I want to become like him someday?
I never said I want to become like him someday, but there are guys that I really liked. One that may not be as well known to people in Michigan, but Tom Cheek was the radio voice of the Blue Jays forever. He's in the Hall of Fame. I loved him. Other radio voices, Jack Buck, St. Louis, maybe my all-time favorite. Harry Callis, Philadelphia. Ernie Harwell, Detroit. Huge Ernie Harwell fan. One of the coolest things was when I started doing Jays games, I got a chance to meet Jack Buck and Harry Callis and Ernie Harwell, and they were all tremendously nice to me, and I'll always be grateful for that. In terms of like big U.S. TV guys, like nobody that's going to surprise you. Al Michaels was and still is the gold standard, I think, for sports broadcasters and play-by-play guys. So I would say he's one that I always looked up to. But I never tried to pattern myself after anybody. I think you've got to be true to yourself. If you're tremendously funny, be funny on the air. If you're a more serious, like let's pound the stats and the numbers and the info, do that. Now you've got to adjust a little bit. You can't be too much of this and not enough of that. You got to be a little bit of both. But I think you've got to be kind of true to your personality to a certain extent. But those are some of the guys I really like.
Yeah, I really like that. Is just be true to yourself. Figure out where you are, like where you're the best at. So that way people are like, okay, I associate my broadcast thinking to him. So kind of pre-COVID, what does like a typical day look like for you in preparation for a Jays game?
For a Jays game, it's a little different when I do a Jays game as opposed to an ESPN baseball or college basketball game. I mean, I see the Jays a lot, so there's not quite as much preparation just because I'm with them so much. First game of a series, there's a little bit more because now you're putting a lot of work in. Say they're playing the Tigers, you're putting a lot of work into the Tigers. So by the time you get to day 2 and day 3 of the series, you're really just looking at the starting pitchers for those days. But what I always tell people, people say, how many hours a day do you work or how many hours a day do you prep? It's a question that I really can't answer because even if I'm not working and I don't have a game for 3 days, I'm reading, I'm prepping. Like whoever the Tigers pitcher is on Thursday, that'll be the Tigers pitcher against the Blue Jays on Tuesday. So I'll DVR that game and I'll watch it. Maybe not all 9 innings, but I'll want to see, well, what did Matthew Boyd do in his last start or something like that? And same for the Jays. I don't do every Jay game. We have 3 guys for 2 jobs that we rotate around, but I'll always watch the game even if I'm not doing it. Or they have something great up here called the Jays in 30. You can just watch a 30-minute condensed broadcast. But I will be on The Athletic. I'll be on local newspapers. I'll be on ESPN.com. Just trying to keep up. I never want to feel like I'm cramming for an exam the night before. You know that feeling. We've all known that feeling from school. I don't like that feeling. So, I do treat it like it's an exam kind of. As soon as it's over and it's on to the next one. But I like to prepare on a steady basis, day by day by day. I do baseball reading in the winter. I do basketball reading in the summer. And I try to keep up on things as much as I can. But in terms of a schedule, if I had a Jays game, I'd get up, probably do a couple of hours of review and prep in the morning, make sure my scorecard from the night before is all tidied up because I won't always finish it in the broadcast booth. Sometimes it's 10:30 at night. I want to get home. So I'll finish my scorecard, put in what I can for the next day. do a couple of hours of prep on the two teams and what else is going on around baseball. And if it's a 7 o'clock game, this is in a pre-COVID world, down at the ballpark by about 3:15. We have a production meeting at 3:30 in the manager's office at 4 o'clock, out on the field about 4:20 for BP, just talking whoever I need to talk to, both teams, back up in the booth 5:15, 5:30, going through game notes, filling in my scorecard, writing down the lineups, whatever stats and notes I want to put on it, grab a quick bite to eat, tape a pregame show hit usually, and all of a sudden it's 7 o'clock.
Yeah, it goes by fast, and how you prepare is how you will do in the end with anything else you do, really. But during your time with ESPN Sunday Night Baseball, you guys did a couple of games out in the bleachers. How is that different from, you say, like the press box?
It's different in every way you can imagine that it would be different. So instead of facing center field, you're facing home plate. Sometimes instead of the sun behind you, the sun is in your eyes, but everything just looks different. You're used to, and every play-by-play guy is different. I usually watch the monitor until the ball's hit, and then I watch the ball live. So you really have to do that from the outfield. Like, I can't see balls and strikes from right field that well, or down the third baseline, or wherever we were. So I'm on the monitor a lot. And then it would kind of get tricky. Do I watch the ball get after it's hit on the monitor or live? Because, my frame of reference is to be high up above home plate looking down on the field. Now I'm lower and I'm in the outfield, and just everything looks different. The angles, if you're up too high, you can't tell the difference between a line drive and a semi pop-up or something. So plus you got fans sitting 3 feet away from you. So everything is different. It's fun, but it takes me out of my comfort zone. I'm happier in the booth. When you've done something 1,000 times that way, it's nice every now and again when we did it, but it was a little more challenging. There were some things that you would miss, or some things you just wouldn't be as sharp on, just because you can't see them as easily out there.
And as you mentioned, sitting right next to the fans, how much do you feed off of like the fans' energy during a game?
Well, I would say much more so in college basketball, obviously, than baseball, because other than at Duke, everywhere else we go, we are sitting right down at courtside. In Duke, you sit up in a crow's nest up above. But everywhere else, you're sitting right down at the court, and chances are very strong there are fans 3 feet behind you. Sometimes to the extent where at halftime, if I want to get out of my seat and just, go to the bathroom or get a drink of water or something like that, I might actually have to look behind me and make sure I'm not going to bump my chair into their knees before I get out. That's how close you are. So I would say, but whether it's baseball or basketball, if you have a great crowd, you definitely feed off the energy. Again, probably more in college basketball, just because it's that kind of a sport. But if I'm doing Ohio State at Michigan, and Michigan makes a big run at Chrysler, and 8-0 run, and somebody knocks down a bucket, and Ohio State calls timeout, place will be going bananas. It's great. And sometimes in those moments, I don't say anything at all. I just let the natural sound of the building take over. But yeah, the more exciting the crowd is, the more excited I am generally. But that probably means the game is pretty good too.
That's one of my favorite things that I love when I watch when you're broadcasting, how you just let the fan, or let us on the other side of the TV listen to what it's like to be like in Chrysler, because that energy. Because sometimes the stuff somebody can say doesn't equal what the fans are bringing to the game.
Sometimes less is more. And if you were to ever talk to any of my producers, they would tell you that I might say, hey, if they knock down another shot here and Ohio State calls timeout, I'm out. Meaning, like, I'm not going to say anything. I know we're going to break. I'm out. If the bases are loaded, 2 outs, 7th inning, and the home pitcher gets a big strikeout to get out of the inning, I might say to the producer even before, if he strikes him out, I'm out. You walk him off. Meaning, like, just take a shot of him walking off the field with the crowd noise. I'm not going to say a word. It's not that I don't want to be a part of it, but it's sometimes I think just the pictures and the natural sound are better than anything I could add to the broadcast.
And as you mentioned, with working with people in the truck, how well do you like? What's the chemistry have to be like between you and your truck team, your producer, your cameraman, and then also the people you work with, like Jay Billis or Dickie V?
Yeah, it's a team sport. I always say sports television is a team sport. And with your analysts, whether it's Jay or Dick or whoever else I work with, the better you know them, the better you get along with them, the better the broadcast is. And obviously I've worked with Jay and Dick for so long that, it's like working with a family member. I mean, you know them inside out. But the other part that most people don't see is like what you're talking about, your relationship with the people in the truck. the relationship between a play-by-play announcer and a producer is incredibly important. Us just talking all the time, me saying to him, hey, Jones is back at the scorer's table, he's coming back in, or him saying, you got to go back to the studio, and me saying, but he just picked up his third foul. Let me do that first, and then we'll go back to the studio. Like, all that happens in like 3 seconds, and then I'll say it on the air, and Jones just picked up his third foul. More on that when we come back, but first, Carl Ravitch has an update back in the studio. So the communication is constant between a producer and play-by-play, and also director. The director's the guy who's in charge of getting all the cameras to take the great shots that we have. And I might want to say, Roy Williams is ticked. He's going to pull all 5 guys. He's going to put his walk-ons in. They're at the table. And I can say that to the producer or director. The director's the guy who's getting the camera to take that shot. So it's constant communication. It really is. If anybody is really interested in sports TV, sitting in a truck is where you want to be during the game. That's where all the action happens, and you see how many people are working.
Yeah, I've been in the truck for BTN, and it's crazy to see all the stuff that they have on there, and it's orchestrated chaos is basically the way to put it up. So with talking about Duke and North Carolina, what arena have you been to that is really just the loudest one to you?
Well, normally I get asked, what's my favorite? That's a different question. So I'm, asking me my loudest. That's a great question. I will tell you, Gonzaga is as loud as any place I've ever been. It is insane. They're absolutely insane. And the students are behind us and up above us. They're not like right here. They're about 10 feet up, and it's just deafening what's going on behind us. Kansas, which is my favorite place to go, is as loud as any place I've ever been. And then I'll give you a couple out of the Big Ten. Michigan State's great. I don't know that it's ever quite as loud as the other 2 I'm going to give you, although it's fantastic. Indiana and Purdue, when their teams are good and it's a really good game, Indiana and Purdue are off the charts, absolutely off the charts. Those are 2 really special places that I love going to. Duke gets crazy loud too. So, in no particular order, Gonzaga, Indiana, Purdue, Kansas, Duke, probably the loudest ones. Kentucky gets very loud as well. I'm lucky. I've been to just about every place on my bucket list, and those are some of the loudest.
By mentioning Indiana, just walk me through back in 2011 when Indiana knocked off #1 Kentucky at home.
Yeah, well, maybe my favorite college basketball game that I've ever done. Kentucky was loaded. Anthony Davis, Michael Kidd-Gilchrist looked unbeatable. Indiana was, I think they were unbeaten, but it was like December, and they hadn't played much of the schedule. This was early in Tom Crean's tenure. They weren't ranked, and it didn't look like they had any business being in the game, but they just stayed in it, and had the ball down by 1 with, 4 seconds, 5 seconds left, something like that. Inbounded, a Hoosier drove down, shovel pass back to Christian Watford. Watford rises up, takes a 3, and the ball's in the air as the horn goes off. Not that you could hear the horn as the light goes on. And it was one of these, it was the perfect situation. It was an underdog trying to knock off a heavy favorite at the underdog's house, crowd going crazy. And there was going to be no tie. Either Indiana was going to win or was going to lose based on whether or not the shot went in, and the shot went in. And it was really fun. It was really cool.
Yeah, I would say that's probably one of my most memorable memories of watching you, is just where you go, Watford for the win, then you have Dickie V, in the background.
Well, I was very lucky. Alliteration seems to resonate with people. If it had been Smith for the win, it's not as memorable. Watford for the win just had a better sound to it, and I was lucky his name started with a W.
So now as we transition towards the end of the show and we talk about the Blue Jays, so what is your expectation with this 60-game season?
Well, I hope everybody gets through the season. That's the first thing, and that everybody is as safe and healthy as possible. The Blue Jays are a very young, interesting, improving team. I'm not sure they're ready to be a playoff team yet, and they play in a very difficult division, which is playing against the National League East as well, which is also a very difficult division. But I think the Blue Jays are ready to be very interesting, and by next year it could be very good. Bo Bichette, Kevin Biggio, Vladimir Guerrero Jr., Lourdes Gurriel Jr. They've got a pitcher who will be up, maybe not right at the beginning of the season, but within a week or 2, named Nate Pearson, who's an unbelievable prospect. And they've got a really good farm system. Signed Hyun-Jin Ryu to give them a veteran stabilizer at the top of the rotation. They've got a healthy Matt Shoemaker back, a healthy Ryan Baracki back. They're headed in the right direction. And again, I think they're a little ways away, but if you told me in 2, 3, 4 years that they're playing in a World Series, I'd buy that.
Lots of guys to look out for coming up this season, but there's been news of whether they will play in Toronto. Do you think that we'll see games in Toronto, or where could the Jays be playing their home games?
Well, as we discuss this now, I think the decision's coming down in the next 24 hours, so my answer could be dated pretty soon. I think they're going to find a way to get it done in Toronto. I think that the government will allow them to do it. For people who don't know, we're doing pretty well up here with respect to COVID. We have very few new cases right now, and everybody's very protective of that, obviously. And for the Blue Jays to play here, with them crossing the border back and forth, and all the teams they're playing against crossing the border back and forth, the law in Canada right now is a 14-day quarantine if you're coming in from any other country. That would have to be partially waived for baseball. And the way I think they would do it is what the Blue Jays have been doing during their summer camp. They're here for about 15 days now, and they're not allowed to leave the ballpark. There's also a hotel right in the ballpark. So they go to their hotel room, they go through a back entrance down to the ballpark, on the field, clubhouse, and back up to their rooms, and that's it. They don't go get a beer, they don't go get a coffee. That, I believe that's what would have to happen for them to get approval during the season. Both the Blue Jays and the visiting teams would have to agree to quarantine in what they're calling the Rogers Center footprint, which is basically the ballpark and the hotel. If they agree to do that, I'm hopeful that the government will sign off on it. I don't know what Plan B is. It might be their AAA facility in Buffalo, which is not ideal. Their spring training complex is down in Florida, where there's a ton of virus right now. I don't think they want to go down there, so I'm hoping they get a chance to play in Toronto.
And I think I remember reading something on ESPN about how the Jays will fine players and potential like jail time. Does that go for both the visiting team and the Jays, or is that kind of out the window and it's not?
Well, it's not the Jays, it's the federal government. It's a law. So it's under the Federal Quarantine Act, which I didn't know about until a few days ago, the extent of it. The maximum fine for violating the Federal Quarantine Act is $750,000. Now, if you did it, they're not going to fine you $750,000. But according to a report, a reporter in Toronto put out a story that said that he had gotten word that the government had told the Blue Jays, if any of your players are out, they or you, the team, will get the maximum fine. And if that doesn't scare you to stay in the ballpark in your hotel room, I don't know what would. So, again, fortunately, the number of cases in Canada right now are pretty low, and everybody here is rightfully protective of that and wants to make sure that we keep going in that direction. So I think the players now have the Blue Jays, by and large are Americans. There's only one Canadian on the Blue Jays. So I think they've all been educated a little bit about, hey, you're in a different country and there are different laws and it's a different coronavirus situation in Canada. And if we want any chance of playing in Toronto, these are the rules. And if I'm a Blue Jay, I would rather play in Toronto and stay in a hotel than play in Buffalo or play in Dunedin. You've got a major league ballpark, major league facilities. What you have to do is when you come home for a 6 or 7 day homestand, you got to stay in the hotel. When the Blue Jays go to Boston or Baltimore or Philly or wherever they're going to go this year, they can go out there because the rules there are different. You can go out and get a beer and sit on a patio and all that sort of thing. Everybody's trusting them to be smart down there, but when they come back to Canada, they would have to quarantine again for the 6 or 7 day homestand. So I think that $750,000 thing caught everybody's attention. And again, I'm hoping they can play in Toronto.
Yeah, and that's just the way it has to be to get people to cooperate. You got to make the fine high enough, but we can only be hopeful for baseball to come back and hopefully finish the season. But to end off the show, what's one piece of advice you would have for anybody that's pursuing a career in sports journalism?
I always give the same two. One is, like I alluded to before, work your tail off. There are a lot of people who want to get into sports broadcasting, work harder than the person beside you. And the other one is be a good teammate. Like I was saying before, sports television is a team sport. Play-by-play, analyst, reporter, camera people, tape people, producer, director, statistician, audio, everything. Be a good teammate. learn people's names, understand what they do, understand how they help the telecast, spend some time getting to know them, and make it a team sport. Put your ego aside a little bit and do what you can to make the show better. And if the show is good, you'll come off looking good.
I love that. Team sport, whether we're on the field or in the booth, it's always a team sport. And with that, Dan, thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to join me on today's episode. Little did I know that when I met you back in March, or no, was it March? It was February, that we would be doing this over Zoom. Hopefully when you come back to Ann Arbor, we can meet up sometime.
All right. I hope so. Be well. Stay safe.